we have this negativity bias by design, by evolution.
Absolutely.
If it's 10,000 years ago, we hear rustling in the bushes, we could assume, oh, it's probably just a bird. But if it's really a bear, we're in trouble. Okay.
Right.
So we had kind of a positivity bias, but our other person in the clan might think, oh, it might be a bear. Even if it really is a bird, it's better to think the worst case scenario for survival. Yeah. So we have that tendency, we have that kind of quirk in our brain. It's not just because we're doing anything wrong. It's just, this is how we evolved.
That's
with
right.
good reason. Now it gets us in trouble with sleep, but I think understanding where it comes from can be helpful in not letting it run us.
Hi, community. Welcome to another episode of Allie's Take. I'm really excited for our episode today. I've got Coach Richard with me. We actually we co-coach together on the yellow team in the immunity program, and he's just one of my favorite people. So I'm super, super thrilled that you agreed to join me for this episode. Today, we're going to be talking about sleep better by thinking less about sleep. Right, Coach Richard?
That's right, Allie, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for that introduction. And yeah, I enjoy so much working with you, but we don't really talk that much. I mean, we text,
We text, yeah.
but we don't really talk that much. So it's just great to see you and talk with you today. So yeah,
I
I'm
feel the
excited about
same.
the topic.
Me too. Me too. I kind of reached out to you and said, what should we talk about? And I mean, gosh, this is such a topic, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it comes up over and over and over again. And obviously we went through this. And so
Mm-hmm.
sharing a little bit about how we went through our struggle and the advice and the help that you know helped us to get to our recovery story. So
Right.
let's just jump in and
Yeah.
share.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like we mentioned, our topic today is sleep better by thinking less about sleep. That's what we're going to dive into today. And our very first kind of heading under this topic is the overthinking struggle. So, Richard, give us your thoughts on this.
Yeah, yeah, Ellie. So yeah, I was a huge overthinker. I mean, I still have that tendency. I'm probably always going to have it. And I
Sure.
think this is something that a lot of people with insomnia have. Those of us with insomnia or who have had insomnia tend to be more anxious, tend to be more perfectionistic, and just tend to think about things. And I was a wonderful problem solver. I mean, and solving problems is useful in life. How would we get to the moon? How would we, pay our mortgage and develop relationships and work and so forth? So, I mean, I'm not saying stop thinking in life, but
Right.
yeah, the thing is, Ellie, that sleep is an effortless process, and to apply a lot of thinking to it is usually counterproductive. Yeah, we have to
Mhm.
think some about it, but I was way overdoing it. I mean, there were times when I would be spending like 5 hours a day thinking about insomnia, between Googling and researching and journaling. Typically, I mean, for a period of time, I would wake up in the morning and have a, a, a a poor sleep, and I would just grab my phone and start journaling. Okay, what did I do wrong yesterday? What did I do right? Did I do this and that? Oh, there's too much light in my room. I have to put blackout curtains on. All these things, and I would just think and think and think. And of course, usually I just write them down and never look at them again. But every now and then I'd go over, okay, well, I've got to make this thinking more productive, and I'll go over what I wrote down in the last 2 months and then summarize it. But this really didn't think, and it didn't really help.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and at
I
some point,
remember that well.
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember
yeah,
that well. I think I've got you beat. I think like I spent 24/7 thinking about sleep, right? I mean,
right,
well, I wasn't sleeping. So, and of course, this is part of the biology, the neuroscience of the brain. Like it is part of that protective mechanism, the overthinking, the rumination, the catastrophic thinking. Like this is all the survival response stuff. And so, I
right,
mean, it's important to kind of understand that, right? Because those thoughts are going to come, and we're going to talk about this more, and they are meaningless aside from the meaning we give them,
right,
right?
right.
And that's where it gets sticky, and we can go into the thinking part, which of course we're going to talk about more
Yeah,
as we move through our discussion today. But that
yeah,
overthinking struggle, it's a real one for sure.
it really is. And at some point along the line, I kind of discovered, I'm not sure, I don't remember how I discovered it, but I realized that too much thinking wasn't serving me. And I
Right.
started cutting down initially on my journaling because I wasn't
Hmm.
really reading what I wrote most of the time. And
Hmm.
so I started cutting back on that. And initially I thought, oh no, I've got to figure this out. I've got to solve this problem. I've got to think heavily about this. But I just kind of gave it up, threw up my hands, and whatever happens, happens. And actually, I started thinking and sleeping, I mean, a little better.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
thinking less actually benefited me. Um,
Yeah.
and I went, and then at some point, I kind of tracked my time thinking. And at some point, I realized, yes, I was thinking up to 5 hours a day about sleep. And I would cut down to 4, to 3, to 2, to 1. Wow. And it cut down like to a half hour a day. And I found, wow, that is really powerful. By not dwelling so much on it, it wasn't, up on this pedestal,
Hmm.
insomnia.
Hmm.
It didn't have the same status as this big monster that I had to try to overcome. We
Hmm.
don't try to overcome insomnia. I mean, that's kind of a battle metaphor.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
let it go. We let go of the struggle.
Yeah. And that comment that you made about, it sounded like when you said I just kind of threw up my arms and just, that's surrender, really, right?
Right,
That's
right.
okay. I can't, this isn't working. There's
Yeah,
nothing I can do. And so it's like this surrender. And of course, that is what acceptance looks like.
yeah,
That's what letting go looks like. And
right.
so then of course we start sleeping better when we get to that place. We don't always stay in that place. We're going to go back and forth for sure in recovery, but it's pretty amazing when we have that first initial kind of letting go experience or letting
Mhm.
be experience
Yeah,
where it's like, oh, we get just that first taste of that, and it is really it's powerful. It was for
right.
me. I do remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, me too.
Well, let's
Um,
move on to
yeah,
thoughts versus thinking, since we're kind of going that direction anyway, right?
yeah, exactly. That's just what I was gonna get to next. Yeah, and I got this from Nick Wignall. Now, Nick is a
Yes.
psychologist, and Daniel has had him on his channel. He's a great
Yes.
guy. His thinking is, pretty similar to ours about sleep and about life and so forth. Some
Yeah.
differences,
Yeah.
but Nick's is a great guy. I really like him, and he talks about the difference between thoughts and thinking. Well, what's the difference? They're the same thing, aren't they? Well,
Mhm.
not really, because we have up to like 30,000 thoughts a day. And
So many
psychologists,
thoughts.
I don't know how they measured this, but anyway, that's what they say. And most of them are just kind of these nothing things like, oh, it's raining out, or I have to pick up some eggs, or I have to get
Mhm.
my son at school. Well, these kind of neutral things. But
Mhm.
then there are the more, emotionally charged things. What if I never sleep again?
Yeah.
Oh, what if I run out of my sleeping medicine?
Mhm.
Um, all these things, these emotionally charged things, obviously they're not just about sleep, they're about anything in life. What if my spouse leaves me? All these things.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but then we can decide what we do with these thoughts. So these thoughts, whether they're charged or neutral, are just part of life. It's part of how our brains work. But then we have a choice as to whether to run with the thought. Okay. Now, if the thought, well, I need to get eggs, led to, a lot of thinking about it, about the price of eggs and where to get the best eggs. And, we'd just be paralyzed by excessive thinking. But what we
Right.
do tend to do is to think about these things that are distressing. It's kind of understandable. We want it to go away. But I discovered at a certain point that I had control here. And I wasn't pushing the thoughts away. Oh, what if I never sleep again? Well, I wasn't pushing it away and I don't want to think that. But I was just kind of putting it off to the side and okay, we can just kind of be down here. For some reason I have this thing when I put a thought off to the side, it's down and to the right. And I don't know why, but
That's so funny. Yeah, guys, it's over
it's like,
here.
yeah, it's like this instead of this big dangerous dog, this little yippy dog that's just kind of annoying. But so anyway, I found that when I would exercise my ability to run with the thought or not, that the thoughts weren't as bothersome. I
Mhm.
wasn't dwelling on the thoughts, and it's the dwelling on them that really just amplifies them. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that makes me think of like how we get entangled in the story of the thought,
Mhm,
right? So a thought is a thought, a thought is neutral, and then we
mhm,
run with it and we give it meaning. And
mhm.
now we're thinking, and now we've created a whole story about it and a whole narrative, right?
Right,
Which then of course leads to action, leads to a belief system, and then we can really find ourselves in a pickle if those are kind of those fear-based thoughts, those that have led to this thinking pattern that's led to this, and here we go, right? Here we go.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, that's I love that. It's so interesting, and I recognize it very well from my own recovery journey. So
yeah.
yeah.
So we think that we don't have power over what we think about, and we don't for the thoughts that just pop into our head, but we really do otherwise. Now, some people say, "Oh, well, this is just I can't do this. I'm just kind of forced to follow these thoughts because they keep coming back. I try to kind of set them aside, but they keep coming back." Well, one of the things that's going on in people's minds is that they think that it's actually going to be helpful to think about these. So they really think that they're letting go of something that's going to benefit them. Oh,
Yeah.
if I think long and hard enough about sleep, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out what's broken up here somewhere.
Mhm.
And
I'll
I'll
be able to fix it.
yeah,
I'll solve this. Thinking will lead to solving.
right,
Not in this
right.
case.
And that's true for going to the moon. It's not true for sleep
Right.
because in order to do all this thinking, our brain has to be awake. Our brain has
Mhm.
to be engaged. And this happens during the day, and then we just kind of get at a higher level of kind of alert status when we're
Mhm.
doing all this thinking, especially when they're anxiety-driven thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, maybe speak a little bit more on that. So all of these thoughts that come in, and we get entangled in them, and they are these fear-based thoughts, and so then they're anxiety driven. And
right,
here we go. We're on the train.
right.
Yeah. How do you recommend working with that?
Yeah, well, I think first to recommend that they are anxiety-driven,
Mhm.
a lot of them.
Having that
And
awareness.
yeah, just that awareness, and it's like not the voice of truth booming down from the universe.
Mhm.
It's just a voice of fear. So it's
Mhm.
coming from a place of fear, and you can reassure that fearful part of you as if it were some child. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm scared of being awake. Okay, well, think of having a young child, your child, being afraid.
Yeah.
You wouldn't criticize him. You wouldn't say, "Oh, there's nothing to worry about. You're okay.
Mhm.
There's no
Mhm.
monster under the bed." Well, no, you give him a hug and you say, "Oh, I'm sorry you're hurting." So you express some kindness, you deploy kindness to yourself and
Yes.
and
Yeah.
understanding, and you don't put yourself down for having these thoughts or for finding it difficult to, stop engaging with these thoughts and start thinking.
Mhm.
You just be kind to yourself. Um, and the other thing is to realize that anxiety-driven thinking um, isn't isn't going to be very productive, isn't going to be very good quality thinking.
Mhm.
Um, that's why I've always liked the idea of scheduled worry. Okay, setting
Mhm.
aside a time every day, like 20 minutes. And I did this for a period of time. I don't do it
Mhm.
anymore, but I used to do
Mhm.
it and I found that helpful. So, so like, it would usually be, maybe at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, kind of a neutral time, not too close to bedtime, when I would just, okay, well, I had these thoughts earlier and I'm just going to do some thinking about it now. And then what the cool thing was that I found that the next time I had these thoughts coming to me, I'd say, "Oh, I'm going to defer that to tomorrow at 4 o'clock."
Mm.
Okay. So
Nice.
I was telling my brain that this is something that, yeah, it's nice to think about, but I don't have to think of it right now. So my brain
Mhm.
was reassured that if I stopped thinking about it during the day and then went back to it later, that it would still get the attention it needs.
Yeah, and I
Mhm.
love that because you're listening to the message from the brain, which is what it wants and what it needs
Mhm.
from us is to hear the message, right? So it can turn down the alarm bells. And so you're acknowledging it. You're saying, okay,
Uh-huh.
I hear you, and I will get back to that.
Yeah.
Message received.
Yeah.
I will get back to that. Yeah, that's a good idea. That scheduled worry time. I've heard that
Yeah.
talked about before.
Yeah.
I didn't do that quite so much, but I definitely did the journaling, processing, and all the all the thinking going on in there. Um, which in some ways was really helpful because it at least got it out of my brain. It
Mhm.
was kind of the same idea, getting those worry thoughts down. Um, so they took up less space in my brain and I was still acknowledging those messages. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really like that. I like that scheduled worry time. It's a
Yeah.
good one.
Now, one of the things that that Daniel talks about and that we learn is sending safety messages to ourselves. So I
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about that
Let's
and
move
why,
on. That's
yeah,
our third point. Yeah.
why safety messages often fail. Okay, so yeah, it's true that, I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm feeling anxious, and it's true that there's not really any threat. There's
Mhm.
no grizzly bear. Okay.
Right.
No grizzly bear coming in my window. It's not 10,000 years ago sleeping in a cave where there were grizzly bears and we
Mhm.
were subject to these dangers. So to tell myself, oh, it's okay, it's really safe. Well, that's okay. But the problem with is that if it's just verbal, is that our fear center evolved way before we had any language or logic. So
Absolutely.
talking to it, yeah, that can help some. I mean, it's
Mhm.
nothing bad about that. But
Mhm.
what I tended to do, Ellie, and I don't know if you did this, but I tended to do this is, okay, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. No grizzly, no grizzly, no grizzly. That just didn't help at all.
No, no. I always say we can't talk our way into safety. We have to
Right.
feel our way into safety, right? Because it's an
Yeah.
embodied
Yeah.
experience.
I
Yes.
would say feel our way and behave our way into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Behave our way, and feel our way.
Yeah.
It's really it's more of an embodied feeling because it's a deep knowing,
Yes.
right? It doesn't live up here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me of a story. So my when my son was like 4 years old, there was a fire, it was like 300 miles away from us. It was never going to reach us.
Mhm.
But he saw houses burning on the news and people running
Mhm.
and so forth. And we could actually smell the smoke. Okay.
Mm.
It became
Mhm.
smoky in Denver where we live.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hadn't experienced that before for a fire that was so far away. Since then, I've experienced it quite a bit, actually.
Yeah.
Even fires, 1,000 miles away in California. But
Yes.
so,
Lots going on there right now.
yeah. So my son
Mhm.
was worried and so forth. And, I could have said, "Oh, Adam, it's 300 miles away and fires never move more than 4 miles an hour," and blah,
Right.
he didn't understand that sort of thing. So all I did was I turned off the TV. I sat him on my lap. I gave him a hug, said, "Sweetheart, we're really safe. You don't have anything to worry about." And he went and played, and he was fine. Now, if I
Nice.
had
Yeah.
spent all that time trying to send logical safety messages to him, that wouldn't have worked.
No.
Okay. And it
Yeah.
doesn't work when we're trying to sleep. Yeah, we can do it a little bit. We're
Yeah.
not we're not 4 years old. We do have some language and logic. Um,
Yeah. For
but
sure.
what I found helped the most for me was to change my behavior. And
Mhm.
so, when I got up in the middle of the night and couldn't sleep, I would get up and watch Seinfeld. Okay. And doing that sent a safety message to my brain. If there were a real risk, if there were a fire 2 miles away, I wouldn't watch Seinfeld. If there were a grizzly bear coming in my door, I wouldn't watch Seinfeld. So my
Yeah.
brain, by seeing my behavior, that I'm doing something that's just kind of fun and enjoyable, concludes, oh, this isn't really that much of a risk.
No
So
problem.
so
Right.
that's a safety message.
Yes, that's what signals safety to the brain because you're engaged in something that you is pleasant, watching Seinfeld. You find yourself laughing. You find
Yep.
yourself actually enjoying the moment. It
Yep.
brings you more present. And all of the sudden, you're back into, oh, the brain gets this message, this safety signal. Oh, maybe Richard's okay. Maybe this isn't as big a thing as I'm making it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Yeah.
love that too about what you were saying before with your son, because it's like, I remember in my journey and having like anxiety spirals and panic attacks, and never once did it work when somebody said, just calm down. Or I
Right.
said that to myself,
Right.
like, that's not helpful, right? That's not how this works.
Right.
And so that this is such an important way of understanding this. Like we really have to fill into that. Our behaviors have to show that we are safe, show our
Hmm.
brain that we are safe.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot. And when we talk about even befriending wakefulness, it's like, what can I do right now in this moment that will signal safety to my brain? What action, what behavior
Hmm.
can I take? Because talking myself out of this feeling isn't going to work,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we learned that over time. It's good to have a cognitive understanding that we are safe, of course, but that's not where the amygdala is going to
Right.
be, yeah,
Right.
processing that. So it is so important, and it is one of those things that in recovery we talk about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we often emphasize is don't push these thoughts or feelings that are distressing away. And that's
Hmm.
true, because if we're pushing it away, the brain concludes, oh, that must be really serious. It's like pushing a grizzly bear away.
Hmm.
But on the other, and that's so it's true, we shouldn't push them away. But on the other hand, we shouldn't have them right up close, right in our face.
Hmm.
Okay.
We don't need to over focus.
Right. Right. And
Hmm.
actually over focusing can lead to problems. We think that it's so important not to push them away. We kind of overreact and overcorrect in the opposite direction. So we don't want it
Yes.
here. We don't want it to just be nowhere that's, we refuse to look at. But it's just kind of a non-reactive acknowledgement. Oh yeah, I have
Hmm.
this thought.
Hmm.
And I always liked the metaphor of the leaves on a stream. Leaves
Yeah.
floating by. Let's see, the leaf is a distressing thought or feeling. And we can kind of dwell on that, but it's just going to float away anyway. That's the
Yeah.
natural progression of thoughts, that they come and they go. So
Yeah.
we need to let that happen rather than just kind of dwell on it and have it real up close, or pretend that it never happened at all.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That hyper focus in the same way can just make it kind of amplify and intensify, right? When we're
right,
just hyper focused on. So
right,
yeah, it's more of an acknowledgement. It's more of a, you're allowed to be here.
right.
And how I always say this and how I term it is, I learned to coexist
Mm-hmm.
with this. I
I
learned
like
to
that. Yeah,
coexist
yeah,
with the anxiety, the thoughts, the unwanted experiences, sensations, and emotions. Once I did that, once I said, okay, well, I have this and this and this I got to get done, so I guess you're coming with me, right?
yeah,
I'm bringing
yeah,
anxiety along with me. And that was actually incredibly helpful, because I wasn't
yep.
pushing it away. I wasn't trying to fix it, manage, or control it, but I was also not willing to not live my life because of it.
Mhm,
So I said, okay, well, here we go. You're coming with me. And I use the
mhm.
metaphor of being in the car, it's like in the passenger side, kind of
Uh-huh.
yelling at me the whole time, right? Like the backseat driver. But before long, just letting it be okay for it to be there. Before
Yeah,
long, it's in the back seat. It's a little quieter.
right.
And before long,
Yeah,
it's just in the rear view. And
yeah,
I'm not even aware of it
yeah,
being present. So it's like it's a slow process, but as we allow it space to just be there and not overreact, it's like this is just a signal from our brain. That anxiety, that fear is just the protective part of our brain. It's just
mhm,
trying to keep us safe, right? And it's going to do that until it actually understands through our behaviors, like you said, through our behaviors, through our actions, through the way we are choosing to live,
mhm.
that we are genuinely okay and safe.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ellie, this reminds me of a story, from my grandfather. He had gout. My grandfather was a wonderful guy. I loved him. When I was about, 8 or 9 years old, he would and staying over at his house, he would get up in the morning, walk into the kitchen for breakfast, and he'd be having a gout attack. And
Oh, wow.
he'd make light of it. He'd call it goat. Come
Oh,
on, goat. Come on out to the kitchen and see the grandkids. And he would just kind of make light of it. So I thought of
mhm.
that when I was
That,
kind of
yeah,
doing the same thing you're talking about, is having it in the cars. Oh, it's my little goat
yeah,
here, my little anxiety, my little insomnia.
yeah.
It's kind of
I it's
minimize
helpful.
it. Yeah,
It's really helpful because I view it the same way as like insomnia. We learn to coexist with that too, right? And when we do that, it lessens the power it has over
right.
us.
Yeah,
It's no longer something to be afraid of or avoid. It's like, oh, I'm just going to coexist with this
yeah,
because it's obviously here as a protective part right now,
right.
that my brain has been misinformed that this is a real threat. It's not. It's a perceived one, but until we get that understanding deep inside that amygdala, it's coming
Yeah,
along for the ride. and
yeah,
and so we really can learn to coexist with the experience of insomnia and anxiety. And as we do that, they just have so much less power, and
right,
eventually they just slip out the back door without us even knowing. It's
right.
just like, oh, they're gone. you know
Yeah,
it's subtle, more subtle than I expected anyway.
yeah. So I just wanted to mention briefly this book I read a few months ago, Think Less, Live More.
Ooh, let's move
Uh,
on to our fourth topic then,
no,
because there we are.
live more, think less. Live more, think less. That's the
Okay.
title of the book. Great book. It's by a Danish psychologist. And this kind of encapsulated for me this whole thing about the importance of not spending too much time thinking about, difficult things.
Mhm.
And they talk about the fact that when we dwell on certain emotions or thoughts, we just amplify them, which is kind of what
Right.
we're talking about. But it's nice that there's kind of, a professional's
Some
kind of
science.
validation of this. And they've actually done
Absolutely.
studies that show that this happens. We amplify feelings or thoughts by thinking about them more.
Mhm.
And it can be tempting to think, oh, I just have to change my thinking. I have to think better. I have to think it's safe rather than it's dangerous. Well, yeah, sometimes, but actually, often just by doing less thinking. And that doesn't
Mhm.
mean denying it. Still do some thinking, not
Mhm.
eliminate thinking, but just cut
Mhm.
way down on it. So
Mhm.
when I went from 5 hours to a half hour, that made such a difference. And I'm so glad this actual scientific validation of that, because it really makes sense.
It does. It makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense. I did something similar, and it's worth mentioning because it's right along these lines. Because that problem solving part of our brain it's a real biological imperative when we are in a fight or flight situation, right? It is actually part of the neuroscience of our brain that we're going to try to problem solve because that's
Mhm.
what we do when we're in fight or flight, right?
Yeah.
But so I recognize that, okay, this is part of my biology, and I can't really fight that any more than I can fight wakefulness, right? It's both counterproductive. But what I can do is what you're saying. I can give my brain kind of what it needs to feel like it's being heard and acknowledged, and okay, and then I can move on. So what I would do is I would say, okay, instead of spending 24/7 thinking about sleep, I would say, okay, we're going to watch one podcast, or we're going to listen to one recovery story or one podcast about sleep or whatever it was, and 1 hour or a half hour, whatever it was. And that's it. And then we're
Mhm.
on to other things, and we're focusing
Yeah.
on other things. And I
Yeah.
started to do that. And it was like, I think it was a nice way of acknowledging and giving my brain sort of that, I need to fix this, that, okay, here's something. And now we're moving on. Now we're going to focus
Mhm.
on something else.
Yeah.
And it really was helpful because it shifted, right, that direction. And I just kind of refocused and said, and now I have all these other things that are important, and I want to spend some time, you know,
Mhm.
on those things. And yeah, so that was helpful for me. So I think that's such a nice way of explaining that, Coach Richard. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we've covered all of our points for today. Do you have anything more that you want to add here as far as how I know in the group, okay, this is one thing I think that you have to mention, because this is such a Coach Richard. Um, I don't know what to call it, but it's a phase. It's a phrase. A phrase. It's a phrase, and it's the moving from "oh no" to "oh well."
Oh yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad
Okay,
you mentioned that.
we
You know,
have to mention it.
I actually got that from Coach Beth.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I had kind of stumbled on that myself before I even knew Beth, um,
Hmm.
saying whatever or oh well instead
Hmm.
of, this is a catastrophe. But Beth
Yes.
made it even better by saying going from oh no to oh well.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And I found that so powerful. The oh no is just that catastrophizing place,
Hmm.
that kind of knee-jerk reaction that this is terrible. And the oh well is just whatever, shrug it off. And I find just kind of the idea of just kind of shrug, a little shrug of my shoulders too, just kind of making it a little
Yeah,
physical.
kind of brings it into the body that way. It's somatic,
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
love this quote from, I don't even know who said it, but it was, anxiety overestimates the threat and underestimates our ability to deal with it.
Oh, I love that.
Don't you
That's
love that?
great. Yeah.
It's so, so true. And I think of it in
Mm,
this oh well versus the oh no versus the oh well, because it's similar. It's right. It's like,
right.
okay, we're going to think this is more of a catastrophe than it actually is, because that's
Right.
what anxiety does, is it overestimates, right? And
Hmm.
it's underestimating our capabilities, our, that we're stronger than we think we are, we're more
Right.
capable than we believe ourselves to be. And none of these things are dangerous. Anxiety isn't comfortable,
Right.
but it isn't life threatening. It isn't
Right.
dangerous to feel anxious. It's a normal feeling, right? Same with fear. Fear is not comfortable. It's definitely not pleasant. But it isn't dangerous. It's not at
Right.
all life threatening to feel afraid. It's just uncomfortable. And once we allow ourselves to feel like the full spectrum of human emotion, I think about my journey and all the emotions I went through, sadness,
Hmm.
the overwhelm and the fear and the anxiety, and even to some depression, and all of it. It's
Hmm.
like, once I gave myself permission to be allowed to experience all of it, and they were
Hmm.
all okay. None of them were dangerous.
Yeah.
It's all part of the human spectrum of emotion, and they were all safe.
Yeah.
And so that really helped me lessen the intensity, because I gave myself permission to experience it all. It was all allowed.
Yeah.
Nothing was, I can't feel that. I can't experience that. It was like,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can, you know, and I'll be okay.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful for me too. And so I love the moving from the oh no to the oh well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, one
yeah,
other thing I just wanted to add, Allie, is that we have this negativity bias by design, by evolution.
absolutely. Hmm.
Okay, if it's 10,000 years ago, we hear rustling in the bushes, we could assume, oh, it's probably just a bird. But if it's really a bear, we're in trouble. Okay,
Right.
so we had kind of a positivity bias, but our other person in the clan might think, oh, it might be a bear. Even if it really is a bird, it's better to think the worst case scenario to
For
save us
survival.
for
Hmm.
survival. Yeah. So
Hmm.
we
Hmm.
have that tendency, we have that kind of quirk in our brain. It's
Hmm.
not just because we're doing anything wrong. It's just, this is how we evolved
That's
with good
right.
reason. Now it gets us in
Hmm.
trouble with sleep, but
Hmm.
I think understanding where it comes from can be helpful in not letting it run us.
I think so too. Yeah, it's based on those survival instincts,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
definitely a good point. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Well, this was such a great conversation with you today, Coach Richard. Obviously could talk to you all day. I mean, I just love having these kinds of conversations with fellow coaches. It's so
Right.
meaningful, and I think it's so helpful for our community. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me today.
Well, Ellie, thank you so much for inviting me to share these thoughts with you. It's always a pleasure. Look forward to doing it again in the future.
Thank you, Coach Richard, for all of your wisdom. Community, if you find that you need more support, please know that we're here for you. You can check out the sleepcoachschool.com. Both Richard and I are there. You can book one-on-one sessions with us. You can join the immunity program. We're on the same team. So you can always find us there, and we will support you in whatever way that we can. Thank you so much for tuning in, and have a wonderful rest of the day, community.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Hi, it's me, Daniel, and I hope you found incredible value in the video you just watched. If you did, please share it with the world, like it, comment, because this way more people can find their way to peaceful sleep. Now, if you like learning by reading and you feel like you have a little ways to go, then head over to Amazon and check out Set It and Forget It. It is a very easy book to read. It is flowy, it has illustrations. But if you're looking for some deeper understanding, then this is Natto, maybe the one for you. I hope they really help. Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping.